Alright, so in that water demonstration that you saw something that looked like this, where all of these little boxes were filled with water. As they turned, all of the water moved from these boxes into this larger box. So what that really means is that this leg, that's the name for one side of a triangle, or a right triangle in fact, right here, this leg we can call side A, or leg A. And this leg we can call leg B. Now for our third leg, because triangles have three sides, our third leg right here, it is a leg, but it has a special name called the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always directly across from our right angle. And we can determine a right angle by this little box that is shown here. So this is our hypotenuse, and it is labeled C. So if I count all of the boxes alongside A, or inside square A, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So square A is equal to 9. Well, let's take a look at square B. Square B is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So square A has 9 blocks, square B has 16. And if we take a look here, our square C has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Oops, that should have been 25. Missed one. So it should have 25 blocks. Now, how can we represent square A mathematically? Well, we represent that by saying A squared. Same for B squared, and then C squared. There's a fancy formula called the Pythagorean theorem, which is named after Pythagoras. And the Pythagorean theorem tells us that A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. So what that means is this 9, it's not 9 squared, but rather it's 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3. So 3 squared, where A is equal to 3, where we have 3 squared is equal to 9. Same here, if we look at our square B, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4. So a 4 by 4, which is equal to 4 squared, is 16, where we get our number. And we see that same thing along our hypotenuse here, where we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 times 5, or 5 squared, is equal to 25. So if I rewrite my Pythagorean theorem, where my A is equal to 3 squared, plus my B, which we said was 4 squared, should be equal to my C, which we said was 5 squared. Well, we know that 3 squared is equal to our 9, plus 4 squared is equal to our 16s, is equal to our 5 squared, which we know to be 25. And sure enough, 9 plus 16 is equal to 25. So we have 25 equals 25, which we know that as a true statement. Therefore, this triangle here has to be a right triangle. So all of this to say but the most important thing is that the Pythagorean theorem derives, or which means comes from, a squared plus b squared equaling c squared. So you should have a note sheet, and we're going to fill in a couple of things and learn how to use the Pythagorean theorem today. So let's begin. So up here it says side A and side B are called legs. So in our little blank we can write legs, where this here is a leg and this here is a leg. Side C, it is also a leg, but remember it has that special name, which is kind of a funny name, called the hypotenuse. So C, again, this is the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always going to be directly across from this square right here. And the hypotenuse, so why don't you go ahead and write this? It's a cross from the right angle. And the right angle is always going to be shown with this box here. All right? And the hypotenuse also is always going to be the longest side of our triangle, okay? So the hypotenuse, it's across from this little square, which we call the right angle, and it's also going to be our longest side. So if we move down, it says, what is the Pythagorean theorem? Well, the Pythagorean theorem is used to find a missing side length on a right triangle. The Pythagorean theorem only works if we have a right triangle, which means we have a 90-degree angle in our triangle, okay? And our formula, if you can remember, I want you to say it with me, is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And this is going to be one of the most important formulas that we cover all year, and one that we're going to have to need to memorize. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I'm going to be asking y'all about that a lot. All right, so we've finished the little top part of our notes, so we are going to move down to where we have proving right triangles. And it says, given three side lengths, use the formula to show whether or not they represent the sides of a right triangle. Okay, so we need to use what we know, where we know that the legs are A and B, that the hypotenuse is across from the right angle, and the most important is that the hypotenuse is the longest side of our triangle. So if we're given three lengths, 10, 15, and 20, which is the largest number? Right, 20. So 20 is going to be our hypotenuse. So I'm going to draw a little triangle down here where we have A, B, and C. What value is the hypotenuse? Right, that is our C value. So 20 is going to represent C, which means 10 and 15 have to be our legs. And it doesn't matter which one you label as A and which one you label as B, as long as you keep it uniform throughout. So I'm going to label 10 as A and 15 as B. Does anyone remember the formula for the Pythagorean theorem? Right, it's A squared plus B squared equals C squared. All right, so now A, we said, was 10, so we have 10 squared, plus B, which we said was 15, so 15 squared, has to be equal to C, which is 20 squared. Well, 10 squared, or 10 times 10, is equal to 100. Plus 15 squared, which is 15 times 15, which is 225, has to be equal to 20 squared, which is 20 times 20. 20 times 20 is 400. Now we need to do a little bit of math here. So we need to simplify this left-hand side. So 100 plus 225 is 325, which should be equal to 400. Is 325 equal to 400? No, of course not. Those are not equal. So because these are not equal, no, it is not a right triangle because it doesn't follow our Pythagorean theorem. So let's try number 2. 21, 28, and 25. Which number is the largest? 21, 28, or 25? Right, 28. 28 is the biggest number, which means that has to be my hypotenuse, or what we call C. So C is always going to be our hypotenuse, the longest side. What about 21 and 25? What do we call those? Those are called legs. So that's going to be our A value and our B value. What is the Pythagorean theorem? A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. What was the value of A? Well, the value of A was 21 squared plus the value of B, which we said was 25, so 25 squared, is equal to C, which is 28 squared. Now, you're going to need a calculator here because off the top of my head, it's a little difficult to figure out what is 21 squared. However, I do know 21 squared is 21 times 21, which on my calculator gives me 441, plus 25 squared. Again, that is 25 times 25. Well, 25 times 25 gives us 625. And lastly, we need to do 28 squared. So that's going to be 28 times 28. And 28 times 28 is 784. So we need to determine, is this a right triangle? Well, what is 441 plus 625? Again, you're going to need your calculator, so just make sure you have one handy. But we get 1,066, which is not equal to 784. So is this a right triangle? No, not a right triangle. All right. I want you to try 3 on your own, so just pause the video and you can work on 3 and 4. All right, so you should have had time to work 3 and 4, and I have the answers here below. So again, always identify your largest number. So here my largest number was 16, so I knew that was going to be my hypotenuse. And again, it doesn't matter which ones we label A and which ones we label B, because they're our legs. So I had 7 squared plus 14 squared equals 16 squared. 7 squared was 49. 14 squared gave me 196, and 16 squared gave me 256. Once I got to this step, I needed to add together 49 plus 196, which gave me 245. Is 245 equal to 256? No. So no, it is not a right triangle. And then our last one for number 4, we do the same thing where we choose the biggest number. Well, my biggest number out of 40, 42, and 58 was 58. So 58 had to be my hypotenuse, which we call C. So 58 squared is equal to my A squared plus my B squared. So 40 squared plus 42 squared. Again, these numbers are going to get really big because we're squaring them. So don't worry, just use your calculator to get those numbers. So we got 1600 plus 1764 equals 3,364. When I add together 1600 plus 1,764, I get 3,364, which is equal to 3,364. Therefore, it is a right triangle. So in order for us to have a right triangle, we have to have a true statement at the end. So because none of the others were true statements, they were not right triangles. So we have to get a number equal to itself. All right, so moving down, we are not going to focus on these two. I'm going to go ahead and just number them as 1, 2, 3, and 4. We are not going to focus on 1 and 2 today. All we're going to focus on is 3 and 4. All right, so what it says over here in the corner, it says find a missing side. Use the Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side length. So we can use the Pythagorean theorem to see if what we have is a right triangle, or we can use the Pythagorean theorem to find a missing side length. So focusing on 3 and 4 today, we want to find what C is equal to. And what does C stand for? Right, C always stands for our hypotenuse. Okay? They might have an X here, or an F, or a K, or any number, but remember, across from our right angle, and the longest side is always going to be our hypotenuse. And most of the time you see it as C. Sometimes, again, like I said, you might see it as a different letter, but it's always across from our right angle, so that's our hint. So what is the Pythagorean theorem? I want y'all to say it together, or say it along with me. It is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, do we know what a is? Yeah, it tells us. It says a equals 6. All right, so I'm going to plug 6 in for my a value. So that will be 6 squared plus b squared. What is b? B is 8, right? So that is 8 squared equals c squared. What is c? Well, we don't know. That's what we're looking for, so we're just going to leave it as c squared. We're going to simplify this left-hand side, okay? So our first step is to plug in our values. That's what we did. We plugged in A and we plugged in B. Our second step is to simplify. So let's go ahead and simplify. 6 squared, which is 6 times 6, is equal to 36. Plus 8 squared, which is 8 times 8, and 8 times 8 is 64, is equal to c squared. Have we simplified completely? No, we haven't. So we need to combine together 36 plus 64, which you can put that in your calculator, and you are going to get 100. So 100 equals c squared. Now our third step is to take the square root. Okay, why do we have to take the square root? Well, we have to take the square root because we're looking for c, and right now we have c squared. So in order to undo a square, the inverse of a square is to take the square root. So what that means is I'm going to take the square root of c squared, and I'm going to take the square root of 100. Okay, when I take that square root, when I take this square root, I'm going to move my paper down, c squared is going to give me a c. And the square root of 100, put that in your calculator, you're going to get 10. So the value for c is 10. And that is our answer. All right, I'm going to work one more with you. So this right here, on this one, Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. My a value is 2, so that is 2 squared, plus my b value is 5, 5 squared, is equal to c squared. 2 squared, that's 2 times 2, which is equal to 4, plus 5 squared, which is 5 times 5, which is equal to 25, is equal to c squared. We just bring that right down. What is 4 plus 25? 29. So 29 is equal to c squared. What do we do next? What's our last step? To take that square root. So when I take the square root of c squared and I take the square root of 29, I get c is equal to the square root of 29, or if you want to put that in a decimal, you're going to have to use your calculator, and you will get that the square root of 29 is 5.385 some long decimal. We're just going to round to the nearest tenth, so 5.38, that 8 rounds to 3 because this is my tenths place. It rounds that 3 to a 4. So my answer would either be 5.4 or you can leave it as the square root of 29. You just have to look at what your instruction says. And so because it didn't give us any instructions here, we can just have the decimal or the square root. So I want you to work on your Go Formative. Your Go Formative is in Schoology. And if you have any questions, you can work together, talk to each other. What you don't finish on the Go Formative in class is going to be for homework.